Hi, it's Corey Sievers here, and in this particular episode of Healthy Savvy Life, we're going to be talking about type 2 diabetes, and yes, you can reverse it. So if you or a loved one has been struggling with that sort of issue, type 2 diabetes, then this information could be really helpful for you. So welcome along. If you're brand new to what we do in the Savvy team, we have action plans and programs and all the guidance and support that you need to really progress to that next level of health and lifestyle. And what we hope to do in these Daily Bites shows is to really give you some hints and tips to, to prevent disease if possible and, look and feel your best as well. So, of course, since we're getting underway with a health topic, it's important that you take a look at our important notice that all of the information that I'll be sharing reflects our personal experience and is for educational purposes only. So that's pretty common sense, really. So if you have any questions, definitely talk with your doctor about this. But type 2 diabetes is an increasing issue, and this sort of came up, to as a topic to discuss because on some of our recent live sessions and the Healthy Wealthy Wise show and some of our insider training sessions, community members have sort of raised that, well, I can't cut back on the carbs because I am on a particular diet and I have diabetes. And it was like, okay, because as a general rule, our Eat Savvy approach, we encourage you to eliminate sugars, eliminate grains, and eliminate inflammatory seed oils as some of the primary steps. The whole process is about the whole process of Eat Savvy is decreasing toxin exposure from all sources and increasing nutrients. And some of the most nutrient-dense foods are more of the whole foods and less of the packaged foods. And so because of the comments that came in about that, oh, I need my carbs because I'm a diabetic, that was a bit like, okay, there's some fundamental misinformation that's going around here. And so this is our opinion, and it's also opinion of many research doctors in the area of balancing up type 2 diabetes. It's a bit of an epidemic. Diabetes is also linked to a myriad of disorders, including nerve damage and cardiovascular disease and all that sort of thing. So, it's a really good idea to do what you can to prevent going into full-blown diabetes. And so many people, when they're in a pre-diabetic state, sort of end up in a bit of fear, not knowing what to do, not knowing where to turn, not knowing the next step. So just hope that this information will give you a little bit of, a glimpse at what you can do. So certainly it is not a chronic condition. If I was just reading up on what some of the medical sites said, and they still assert in the documentation that it is a chronic medical condition. Type 2 diabetes is a chronic metabolic condition, and there is no cure, is what they say. Now, that we have to start to think about what do we mean by cure then? So it's a chronic condition where there is no cure. Well, I think that what they're asserting there in the terms of cure, there's no simple quick fix that cures the problem because it's a lifestyle disease. So if your lifestyle is out of balance, the disease will be there. If your lifestyle is in balance, then it won't. So it's managed by your diet and lifestyle. So there is no cure, but there is the ability to reverse. And I think that's the confusion there. Many people think that it's a lifelong problem. There is no cure, so there's nothing I can do. And that is far, far, far from the truth. So first of all, let's deal with this issue of what diabetes is and share some quotes from different people working in this particular arena. So first of all, Dr. Sarah Holberg says that diabetes is a state of carbohydrate toxicity. Reversing type 2 diabetes, starts with ignoring the guidelines. Now, that might be a bit of a shock to you, as it is for many people that are on the verge of type 2 diabetes. Here is somebody that works in obesity, works in chronic disease management, and runs programs to help people lose fat and maintain and manage their diabetes. And she's asserting that it's a chronic, it's a state of carbohydrate toxicity. So she's essentially asserting that we've been fed the wrong advice from the dietary guidelines about eating, up to 11 serves of complex carbohydrates every day, and even sugar being something that's okay for us. So she stated that reversing type 2 diabetes starts with ignoring the guidelines. And that is because, it's my opinion that we're not telling diabetics the truth. We're not telling them that we see, you pick up, go to the newsstand, find a Diabetic Living magazine, and it's got carbs loaded with carbohydrate-rich recipes. And that's sad. That is sad because we're not telling diabetics the truth, in my opinion. Now, let's separate off type 1 diabetes from type 2. We're not talking about type 1 insulin-dependent diabetic. Once upon a time, it used to be, early onset diabetes and adult onset diabetes. So there wasn't a type 1 and type 2. It was like early onset that you got when you were a kid because you did have a malfunctioning system for producing insulin. And then it was adult onset, meaning that when you got much older, you damaged your body. Now we have kids that have type 2 diabetes and even toddlers that are type 2 diabetics. So there's something in our dietary guidelines and our fundamental habits of eating and lifestyle that is causing the problem. And so, sorry if I get a little bit, passionate about this. I mean, I shouldn't apologize because this is important, and I don't think that we're really understanding that it is so simple. So I look back on my early years in my 20s and everything, and the blood sugar imbalance problems I had, and the fact that I was a carbaholic, and that I would have hypoglycemic attacks and blinding headaches if I hadn't eaten for a couple of hours. And right now I practice intermittent fasting to be able to lower my insulin and my blood sugar and all that sort of thing, intentionally practice fasting. And I have not yet eaten today, and I'm perfectly fine. Once upon a time, I would have been in bed with a migraine because I didn't have my blood sugar under control. So through dietary management, I've been able to really get that under control. So reversing type 2 diabetes starts with ignoring the guidelines, said Dr. Sarah Holberg. So not me. I would agree, but so let's look at what's the Pareto Principle. The Pareto Principle is what's the least amount of effort that you can put in to get the maximum results, the 80-20 rule. So what 20% of actions would give you 80% results. So the Pareto Principle changes that would make the biggest impact for type 2 diabetes. What would they be? That would be cutting the sugar and the carbs. Definitely cutting back on sugar and carbs. So we suggest looking for all the added sugars, even eliminating the grain products and sticking with starchy vegetables, those sorts of things, and even some fruits. Some of the carbohydrates that are also nutrient dense. And this is backed up by a lot of forward-thinking medical experts as well. So number 1 would be cut the sugar and the carbs. Number 2 would be to exercise, start increasing your activity, and also maybe even including things like fasting to be able to burn off the carbs and start to get your body used to being metabolically flexible and able to access fat for fuel. And number 3 would be to supplement with trace minerals. Now, there's a number of different different supplements that can make a difference, but what we've found has been the most beneficial over the long term for people that have struggled with cravings and blood sugar ups and downs and hunger pains and all this sort of thing is trace minerals. So things such as chromium, these are good, vanadium, all sorts of trace minerals that are often deficient from our foods really help with cravings. There are other things too, like berberine and cinnamon and these sorts of things that help with the blood sugar response and also the post-food insulin spikes that can happen. And we want to blunt those and keep things more balanced out. So they're just some tips there. So cut the sugar and carbs, exercise, start to walk more, exercise more, and skip snacking between meals. Maybe even begin to practice fasting. Include more nutrient-dense whole foods in your diet and more healthy fats and less of the the packaged foods and all that sort of thing, which leads us to, and then maybe supplement. We find so many times that people who struggle with blood sugar imbalance issues and are diabetic, for example, even, find that their ability to manage their sugar level improves when they're using trace minerals and some basic supplements to take care of the cravings and, just help the body to function better, really. So let's just take a little bit of have a look at a thought from Professor Robert Lustig. Now, he asserts that type 2 diabetes is a processed food disease. A processed food disease, he believes. And it's because of all this misinformation, the fact that when we go into a supermarket, for example, but the aisles are loaded with packaged foods. All of the things that we think don't have added sugar have added sugar. So savory foods have added sugars. Low-fat yogurt has added sugar. All sorts of the things that get the healthy tick from the Heart Foundation loaded with sugar. So there's a lot of information around that. You can read his book, Fat Chance. There's lots of other information that we recommend related to this overabundance of sugar in our lives. So it's a processed food disease. I would agree with that. The more we can move towards whole foods, the better. All right. So the next thing about processed foods is when we talk about the Eat Savvy approach, the three fundamentals that are just the biggest difference, the Pareto Principle fundamentals for following the Eat Savvy, is to cut the sugars of all kinds, cut the grains back, especially packaged foods, and cut the inflammatory oils. Doing those three things makes such a big difference. When you eliminate packaged foods, you get rid of the added sugars, you get rid of the grains, and you get rid of all the inflammatory seed oils. And you also get rid of exposure to, in most cases, to pesticide residues from things such as glyphosate. Now, they've been able to link the increase in glyphosate usage on crops to the prevalence of diabetes. So yes, the initial way that these foods got or that these pesticides actually got approved is it was believed that it had no impact. We had no pathways to be impacted physically. But here's what researchers believe, that these pesticides significantly damage, the residues left on the food significantly damage the microbiome, our gut microbiome, and then that impacts our ability to deal with food and messes up our microbiome and our balance. And so this, again, looking at the prevalence there, when they really started to ramp up usage of the glyphosate on crops, diabetes actually went up significantly. So it's not a guarantee of causative, it's obviously simply a correlation. So what I'd like to do now is throw to a video with Dr. Jason Fung, and he's a nephrologist, and so he's been somebody who's been used to dealing with the issues that ensue when somebody doesn't manage their diabetes and they end up on dialysis and all of these sorts of things. And so get some of the thoughts from him. Now, he is a big proponent of fasting, and he actually, in his practice, actually puts people on extended fast, so not just intermittent fasting with a period of skipping meals every day, but on extended fasts to help them lose weight and balance their sugar and eliminate diabetes. But let's just take a look, have a listen to what he believes about type 2 diabetes.
Disease is actually reversible. But you have to know how to reverse it. If you don't know how to reverse it, then you're just going to get worse. And the thing is that the drugs don't actually do anything for the disease. And this is also not controversial, because the thing is that type 2 diabetes is a disease of too much insulin resistance. And that's not controversial. Everybody acknowledges that, right? So if you have very high insulin resistance, it's going to cause high blood sugar. Right? But that's the symptom of the disease. The disease is actually too much insulin resistance. So the treatments that we give are all targeted at blood sugar, right? That doesn't make any sense. So if you look at what happens over a period of 10 years, 15 years, what happens is that you start off with one medication, then you take 2 medications, then 3, then you take insulin, then more insulin, and more insulin. And after 10 years, you started with one medication, now you're on 100 units of insulin a day. Well, you're taking more medication to do the same job, to keep that blood sugar the same. That means your diabetes is worse. Even if your blood sugar is better, your diabetes is worse than it's ever been, because you've never actually done anything about treating the insulin resistance. So that patient who went and lost weight and exercised and cut out the carbs and cut out the sugars, they actually reversed their insulin resistance, and therefore their sugars came down, which is far different than making your blood sugars go down by force, by medication, and ignoring the actual disease. So that's the fundamental mistake that we've made over this last 20, 30, 40 years, right? We've treated the disease of type 2 diabetes, which is too much insulin, as if it was type 1 diabetes, which is too little insulin.
Hope that gets through to you and you understand, especially if you have been struggling with type 2 diabetes or you have a friend or family member who has as well. So this is from a doctor who understands the science, who has worked with people and essentially says that things have been dealt with in the wrong way. And if we simply focus on using medication, then we aren't dealing with the underlying issue. And the analogy is somewhat like an infection. If you have an infection in your leg, well, you could go overboard and amputate the leg, but that's overboard. But if you have the infection, usually they would treat that with antibiotics, for example. But with an infection comes a fever. And so it doesn't make any logical sense to treat the fever because everyone knows that that's just a symptom of the infection. And so you've got to treat the infection. And again, so going overboard might be amputating the leg. And so what's been happening in type 2 diabetes is we've been, medicine has been treating the symptom of insulin resistance rather than the actual cause. So we must really help you to reduce your insulin resistance, get back on top of things in order to be able to turn the issue around. So hope that offers some help and support to you and anyone that you might know. So that's it for this particular episode of Healthy Savvy Life. And look, whether you have type 2 diabetes or not, everyone would benefit from focusing on those same basics, really being careful with the amount of sugar that you're consuming. So that's it for today. Catch you again next time. All the best and be savvy.